Budge!
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 Welcome to Budge, behavioural science in business, education and life. I'm here with Dr. Darren Coppin, behavioural scientist, psychologist, speaker, writer, and of course one of the original members of the Supremes. How are you?
I'm beautiful, Paul Miles, Managing Director of the Busy Group, one of Australia's largest education, training and employment companies, and actually was down to the shortlist to play Katniss Evergreen in the Hunger Games.
I was. Usually we talk about behavioural science with business education and things like employment services, long-term unemployed, that sort of thing, work from home, business practices. But a bit of a break from the norm. We're going to talk about behavioural science and happiness. Particularly, we're going to talk about why you shouldn't ever look over the fence and why you need antidepressants like a hole in the head. I'm kind of a bit baffled by that. I'm just looking forward to what we're going to talk about there. But mate, behavioural science and happiness, it's something that affects us all. And it's well known that we are, as a society, richer. We work less, well, allegedly. We are far better off than we've ever been. Yet we are more and more and more miserable as a society.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. 400% increase in GDP since World War II, and by some measures 750% increase in depression. But it also depends, like happiness is I suppose the purpose of life, to try and be happy, live a life well lived. But there are so many different definitions of what happiness is. Is it the same as well-being? Is it the same as hedonistic happiness? Is it the same as life satisfaction or eudaimonia?
Sorry, what? What's eudaimonia?
Eudaimonia won than me. Eudaimonia is really written back in the ancient Greeks. It was their description. There's not a direct translation, but it kind of means a life well lived. And Aristotle in particular proposed that to lead a life well lived, we need to know what our strengths and virtues are as an individual and excel in those, to develop them and to live your life through them and become better and better, and you'll become happier. So it's like a strengths-based life. And I suppose it plays to that old saying that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day of your life. It's sort of along those lines. I find it fascinating that with all the research around employment and happiness is that the people that are the least happy jobs are things like security guards, where they spend large amounts of times on their own. And then you've also got the happier jobs, the things like, you often find things like construction, where groups of men who get to chat and have a laugh all day are a lot happier jobs, which then potentially leads us to, the reality of is happiness primarily based as humans on us being social creatures? And the most well-known happiness research that I know, of course, is the Harvard one, where they tracked men from the late 1930s, including, I think, members of the Kennedy family, through till sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And it might even still be going on. And the major thing that I found around happiness psychologically was the fact that it's all about personal relationships, and not necessarily romantic relationships, but it's all about personal relationships. And you could be super rich, super healthy or unhealthy or whatever it might be, but predominantly your happiness was related to your personal relationships. And is that effectively because we as humans are just social creatures? Yeah, hugely. If I was to ask you what have you enjoyed most in the last 3 months, what
probably not recording these podcasts. Oh no. Look, it would absolutely be time with my partner Christy and with the kids. I've got 3 kids who are just amazing, so it'd be time with those guys and Liverpool winning, I would say, which hasn't happened a lot in the last 30 years. So,
what would you be looking forward to in the next 3 months?
Exactly the same thing. It's coming up to some holidays, so I'm taking, catching up with the kids at different points and catching up with my partner. So definitely those things, I think.
Yeah, so it's weird when you say to people what's going to make you happy, it's money. With money I'll be able to do anything, and I'll be able to do this, and it can facilitate things such as having more time to spend with your children. But when you ask people to look back on your life and what were the best moments, what are your biggest regrets, it's generally always, I remember doing this when I was 7 and doing that with a family and doing this with the community, and actually the Blitz was terrible but we all got together, the floods were awful but we came together as a community. So it's these things where as humans relationships are massive, but it's only technically one of 6 key components that makes up.
And I was going to ask you, you've come up with 6 components of well-being. Are these well known, or are these ones that you've sort of identified yourself?
No, they're not ones I've identified myself, but they're ones that really come out of the University of Pennsylvania and the positive psychology department there, led by Marty Seligman. And there are lots of other measures that actually probably could be a bit better, but what's great about this one is that it's easy to remember and relate to the 6 components, and it makes up the acronym PERMA. And the first thing that makes you happy is just a general happy approach, positive emotions, and experiencing positive emotions.
Because there's also, there is some research, isn't there, that overly focusing on being positive all the time isn't necessarily beneficial to you. It can actually be detrimental to your health, if you try to take a positive approach to everything. Yeah,
chasing happiness doesn't necessarily create happiness, and can create anxiety and stress and what have you. It's hedonistic, and that's one of the things that the ancient Greeks, sort of why they came up with eudaimonia, is that it is separate from hedonistic happiness, really, and short-term happiness that can often lead to longer-term issues.
Yeah, okay.
As you'd well know.
Moving on. So, second on your PERM list, you've got positive emotions, engagement. What does that mean?
Well, this means that we love to be engaged in what we do. We love to do stuff that we're interested in. And this is where that leading your life through virtues and strengths really hits the nail on the head. It was true 2,500 years ago, and just as true today. So it is. Time goes a lot more quickly. You get into flow. You excel. You do well, and you're happier when you're playing to your strengths and virtues. So being engaged in what you're doing is crucial.
And again, I'm going to relate that back to work. So that's an important component of work, right? Is that we're all told to do what you love and money will follow, that sort of thing, which isn't necessarily true. But do something you love, happiness potentially follows.
Yes, and the trouble is, if you say, what do you love doing to your 13-year-old child? It's, I love Minecraft, and I love partying, and I love sweets, or football. Yeah. Great, you're going to be a Minecraft playing footballer while sucking on a Chupa Chup. And that's not what it's about. It's finding out about what your true core is. So, for example, we've got a mutual friend, the CEO of ReadyTech, a software company, Mark. And his greatest strength from a strengths assessment is love. And it's not like he goes putting it about a lot. It means that he actually likes doing nice things for people, but having that reciprocated. And one of his favourite pastimes is cooking. And some people love cooking because their strength is appreciation of beauty and excellence, the picture, the thing that they produce, or they've got an attention to detail and self-regulation. They like following but his is love. So the reason why he loves cooking isn't the actual act of cooking, it's giving it to people, sharing it to people, and getting around a table and mixing. And so you can see that if you've got a particular strength, you can apply it to almost any job and use your strength to excel at that job, rather than doing a job that is your strength or what you love doing already. So he's not a chef, but he's a brilliant leader of a tech company because he likes listening and getting feedback and working with his colleagues, and people feed off of that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, he's never cooked for me, by the way, so we need to address.
You're not his friend.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Moving on to relationships. It's a good segue. So the 6 components of well-being: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, and that's where whenever I think of I go through life, relationships seem to be the major thing for me in terms of happiness. Not again, come back to that research from Harvard, not necessarily even just the romantic ones, but actually those, like our relationship, and friendships and so on. So relationships this must be one of the major ones when it comes to
you've got to say it's right there in the middle. It's core. And what's interesting is if you have connection. The broader your connections, the more resilient a person you are as well. So it's not just, I feel happy, I've got higher levels of well-being. You're able to cope with setbacks better. And it's not just about having, and looking at the research, it's not just about having people around to support you if something bad befalls you, or even something good happens. It turns out that you're greater, or one of the fastest ways of increasing well-being is by volunteering, doing something for somebody else without expectation of return. So if you're connected to yourself, great, then your family, then your work, then your community, then something bigger than all of that. If you're connected and have relationships of that depth, then the broader that goes, the deeper your inherent resilience and able to not just cope but also think cleverly and think your way out of situations.
Fourth on the list is meaning. What does that mean?
Actually, it's a really good question because people think meaning and purpose are the same things.
Yeah, that's
but they're
what I was thinking.
not exactly. But there's an overlap. That's a whole different podcast on meaning and purpose, and it also feeds into perhaps why we've got all of these wonderful things that you touched on: more food, more health, more freedom, personal and national, and what have you. But we're becoming more anxious, stressed, and depressed. It doesn't make sense. But there is an issue that we love meaning in things. So people often turn what they're doing, no matter what it is, whether they're making a bomb for a fighter aircraft or they're a cleaner at a hospital, if they perceive that as being for the greater good and having some meaning to it, then they're happier.
It's funny you should say, because one of my best mates, Chris, he's a cleaner at a hospital, and he finds such meaning in his work, because he's helping out in emergency room and all that sort of thing. And he finds that real purpose in that role. Yeah,
unless the base is clean and hygienic, then people still die and what have you. But it's the bottom line of contributing. But there's also a lack of purpose and meaning. We used to get it from religion, but the less religious we become, we lose that guidance, because we used to be able to default. This is how I behave. I've got these rules and regulations from the Torah, Quran, or Bible, and Hindu writings and what have you. And this is the point of it, and this is the payoff. But if we're secular, if we don't necessarily, if we're agnostic or whatever, atheist, we've lost that. So what's filling in that gap?
This is a major thing in modern day society around happiness. I'm an atheist, but I do recognise the benefit, the religion, and coming from Wales, the local church was everything. But as well as things on a Sunday, you had youth club and scouts and drama things. There was always something going on that created a community. And of course, the further we move from religion, you don't have that central sense of community that you could base these things around. And potentially, that for me is another significant reason as to why we are becoming less happy. Despite my ardent atheism, I do recognise the value that we've lost in not having that sort of central part of the community.
And one of the greatest strengths and benefits of religion is that it draws people together. They give you a common culture, a common language, and just people around to support each other.
Accomplishment, mate. So you feeling accomplished in life or work or
just everything?
Yeah.
Splendid. But the accomplishment was quite a late addition to this list and in writing.
By University of Pennsylvania.
Yes, yeah, and in general with studies, because you think you pretty much tick them off with positive emotions and engagement and meaning and relationships, but it seems that you can still feel hollow as a human unless you feel like you're making some sort of progress, some sort of accomplishment in life. And that can even be if you're working on a factory line, you're achieving your X number or beating your X number of components that you've put together that day. And it can be a shared accomplishment. But we need to feel like we're making some sort of progress in life. That's why we just love thinking about holidays in future. We've got a goal, we're heading towards it, and we're going to be doing something, and I can tick my box that I've had sangria there or whatever it might be.
Is goal setting then and things out in the future part of that happiness then?
Yes. Yeah, because of that sense of accomplishment, moving towards something, and particularly if we've lost, we've got the existential vacuum. We've lost that meaning, but the sense of accomplishment can be, and this is worked into in terms of behaviour and nudges and engagement into everything from computer games in particular. You've just got to feel like you're moving forward. It's challenging you, and it's not too difficult, or it's not too boring, and what have you. So
that existential crisis bit then, and this is going to sound I don't know, not overly intelligent, but the accomplishment is a way of dealing with the demise of religion in terms of happiness. Not entirely,
but it's an inherent human need. So it's compounded, I'd say. And that sense of accomplishment might have been pacified somewhat if you feel like you're doing good day to day, you're getting by, and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife or whatever. But also bear in mind now that we're not focusing so much huge effort on hunting, gathering, the basic bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Having said that, a lot of people think, well, we're more miserable now because we're navel gazing. We've got a lot more time to stare at, and think and ponder and worry. But it's not strictly true. In fact, if you take almost all surviving hunter-gatherers, they spend a lot less time a week actually working and commuting to work to hunt and gather. So, for example, the Hadza in East Africa, they spend an average of 18 hours, I think it was, hunting, gathering, whereas obviously we spend in the Western world a lot more than that.
However long it takes to get to Tesco's or Coles or wherever it might be.
Yeah, I think there was a German anthropologist said about them that they spend more time worrying about games of chance than their chances of game.
I made last number 6 on the list.
Funny?
I don't know.
It's profound.
It's profound. It's very profound. I'll sit and ponder that later, mate. Number 6 on the list was health. I suppose that goes without saying, is your health really does massively impact your happiness.
Yeah. We know about the endorphin rushes and dopamine and what have you from exercise. The diet is so much easier to eat bad stuff and cheaper generally, and in terms of time, sleep, we're getting massively eroded in terms of sleep. Curiously, some of the longest lived people are in Hong Kong and Japan, and yet they've got some of the most deprived sleep.
Oh, really?
Deprived,
Absolutely. So that's completely counterintuitive.
They're battling against that. But what I find interesting is we know what makes you happy in terms of the hormones that can be released. You've got serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine. So we should just pop a pill and we're a lot happier. But they wrote about that in Brave New World. Everyone took this pill. You're not only happier, you're more docile and what have you, but everyone was horrified by the notion of that. And it's weird how we kind of know how to make ourselves happier in a way, but without that meaning, relationships, accomplishment and what have you, just having the positive emotions because we popped a pill, it still leaves us hollow in our lives. We
have to mention talking about those drugs, the hole in the head research of the 60s or 70s that you mentioned was quite a fascinating story. I mean,
antidepressants are obviously driven by commercial concerns as well as health concerns. And you can look at studies on the effectiveness of them, and electroconvulsive therapy in a number of studies could be seen to be more effective than antidepressants, possibly because it's stimulating production areas in the brain, but also trepanation.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this word until you mentioned it the other day.
A hole in the head, because you clearly need one. But yeah, there was Lady Amanda Fielding in 1970, encouraged by results with her colleagues and what she'd read about. And I think it was Shiva, ancient Hindu god, also had a hole in the head to not just alleviate bad spirits and what have you, but actually a proactive thing to make you happier. And it seemed to work for her. So wow. She actually drilled, I think it was a dentist drill or something, a hole in her head, and swore by it. It was a great result, and so it was with her colleagues.
I feel like, I know we're going to have lots of video cutting through this video. I feel like we should have a disclaimer at this point not to drill a hole in your don't drill a hole in your head. Mate, you also mentioned why we should look over the fence. What was all that about?
Yeah, well, it's actually, and this brings us to the bottom line of why are we unhappier when we should be so much happier? And we've lost purpose, we've lost community, we've lost exercise largely. We're an animal devised for long-term walking. We're an endurance hunter. But comparison is one of the key issues. We used to just have to compare ourselves with groups of 30 people, a maximum of 200. And now we're comparing ourselves to everyone in the world. So we're getting the negative news from every corner of Arkansas and what have you, but also we've got to be as beautiful as the Kardashians. So the comparison, so Eddie Jack, who wrote that Happiest Man in the World, sadly just died there in the last 12 months, but he said, don't look on the other side of the fence. You'll never be happy if you look at your neighbour and make yourself sick with jealousy. But we can't help it with social media and what have you. All we're doing is putting forward the best possible life that we're not really having, but we're just comparing ourselves and feeling inadequate a lot more. So it's that confidence in yourself and not looking externally for endorsement, I suppose.
Mate, before we wrap up, 6 components of well-being or happiness. How can we quickly use those to become happier at work? What should we do for a living, I suppose?
Yeah, I think we can just, again, look to Aristotle, obviously, and just...
That's where I usually look for advice.
Yeah, exactly. Reading in the original ancient Greek. But work out, do a strengths assessment of all your staff, and so people can appreciate others and value them, but it gives you clues how to approach your job and how to excel, but also what your true company values are, authentic ones. The other one is use emojis in your emails and communications.
It's true. This is true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Makes people like you more as well.
Yeah, and because people always read the written word in the most negative way it could have been read, so people are getting annoyed and wound up by you. But if you put a little winky face at the end, it makes them think, oh, hang on, they weren't having a go at me. They were just, little winky face there. But also build those relationships. Just keep people meeting and chatting and interacting in person will make a massive difference to happiness at work.
Thank you, Dr. Darren Coppin. Thanks for watching Budge, Behavioural Science and Nudge Theory in Business, Education and Life. If you like what you're listening to, what you're watching, please throw us a like or a subscribe on YouTube or whatever else you're listening to on. And we are interested in comments. We'd love to hear your feedback and to talk about much more. So please put a comment on, particularly if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching.